the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippi, and welcome back to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. My name is Connor Philippi. Did I say that already? I don't care. And it's going to be a game that, oh my gosh, the Vikings need to win this one. Otherwise, they will be the laughingstock of the league. It's the Jeff Saturday-led Indianapolis Colts coming into US Bank Stadium. Vikings 6-1. We don't talk about the one versus the Cowboys that lost. Get it out of our minds. But Colts coming into US Bank Stadium, the absolute shell of his former self in Matt Ryan coming into the stadium. And we're going to do a breakdown of kind of the whole thing, what to expect, kind of go over each team, what the keys to victory are. So the whole video will be just that. And make sure you stay tuned for tomorrow because that's when I'm going to be doing my predictions for the entire Week 15, every single team. Usually I do it opposite, and I do the whole week first, and then I do the Vikings on Friday. But since the Vikings play Saturday, I figured I'd get that out of the way first, which means that I will miss the Thursday Night Football for my predictions. But I am going to say that I predict for Purdy to have kind of a rough second game as a starter, and I do predict the Seahawks to win. So mark that down. It's technically still officially in a video, so I'm still going to write it down as part of my prediction. You just won't see it in the video because obviously the game will have ended by the time I made that prediction. So that being said, that's my prediction for that one. Full video for the NFL Week 15 is out tomorrow or Friday, whenever you're watching this. But today on Thursday, we're going to be going over the Vikings versus Colts. So do keep in mind the stuff I say about injuries. We're not 100% sure yet. So, you know, I knew this at the time that I made this video. So we're going to go over everything, starting with the history of both teams. So this is kind of, I'm hoping the Vikings, first of all, I also want to mention that the Vikings can clinch the NFC North and take first place if they win this game or if the Lions lose, which at this point, as long as the Vikings can win one of the next 4 games, I'm going to root for the Lions the rest of the way. I want to see them in the playoffs, even if it means the Vikings have to play them the first week of the season or first week of the postseason. It could be Vikings at 2 seed, Lions at 7 seed. I don't care. I just want to see the Vikings or the Lions in the playoffs. So I'll root for them as long as the Vikings can just win one, so I don't have to feel like, oh, there's still a chance. But yeah, the Vikings can clinch the NFC North with a whole lot of things this week, even if they don't win, but let's make it a win because it's the Colts. Anyway, the Colts do lead the all-time series by a lot. They've won 18 of the 26 games we've played, 18-7-1 in the whole stretch against us, including, is it 6 or 7? I believe they have beaten us the last 6 times in a row. They've beaten us. So that includes a really ugly 28-11 loss in 2020, which, you know, that was the first game of the season. It was the second game of the season after we had just gotten crushed by the Packers, and I was like, okay, the Packers are good. Maybe we can still salvage this. And then we lost to the Colts that year when they had Phillip Rivers, and I was like, all right, the season's already kind of over before it started. So that was a little bit frustrating, but yeah, the Colts have kind of commanded things the last few years, ever since we haven't beaten them in the 2000s. That's how bad it's been. But we should be able to, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I have these buttons on the front of my, or the side of my Bluetooth mouse, and I just realized clicking them either makes the page go forward or back. I didn't realize that. Anyway, that's cool. But yeah, the Colts have really commanded this series. Hopefully the Vikings can get one on them and win for the first time in the 2000s. Because again, this Colts team should not be able to beat us. But you never know, because the Vikings have played down to every single opponent we've had every single game this year so far. Going over the Colts depth chart, we've got obviously Matt Ryan as QB1. When Sam Ehlinger played, he played so poorly that he got moved all the way to the 3rd string. So now Nick Foles is the 2nd seed. Wouldn't it be funny if we ended up, or not the 2nd seed, the 2nd string? Wouldn't it be so funny if Nick Foles ended up coming in and playing the Vikings and just torching the secondary? But anyway, Matt Ryan has been playing just really poorly all season long, and that'll be a major factor when I go over the key factors of the game later. But then we have Jonathan Taylor, the running back, that in terms of what he was expected to produce, he definitely has definitely disappointed so far this year. He's not like the worst running back in the NFL by any means. He's still a good running back. It's just that he's kind of fallen into that medium category of running back so far this year. He's not played up to par. So I'd be shaking a lot more in my boots seeing Jonathan Taylor's name if it was last year. But still, we have to be on our toes because we don't have the best running defense, and Taylor's still a good running back. We have Michael Pittman, who's been one of the more underrated wide receivers this year, as well as Paris Campbell. They've both been kind of working really well under or behind the scenes, and I feel like they'd each be having really good seasons if they had a decent offense around them and a good quarterback throwing the ball to them and a better offensive scheme that wasn't led by a former offensive lineman that hasn't had any professional job in the NFL yet, besides this one. Was a high school coach, and that was it. But anyway, that aside, Alec Pierce, who I'd never even heard of, is their wide receiver 3. So a good test for our secondary. Can we lock up two decent wide receivers and a wide receiver that would be on anyone else's practice squad? We'll see what happens. But tight end Kylen Granson, also have never heard of him. So either I'm not as well versed in fantasy as I used to be, or that's a guy that just got promoted. So not a lot of threat there on the tight end side. Although of course the Vikings gave up a first down to an offensive lineman last week in Penei Sewell. So take it or leave it. And then on the offensive line, we have a pretty solid offensive line here. The Colts have never had like a really bad offensive line. Of course, Carter O'Donnell on the IR, but I feel like they're kind of middle of the road. I feel like it's not an offensive line that this pass rush will be completely locked up by unless we don't fix the problems we had last week, which could definitely happen. A side tangent real quick, Ed Donatell's press conference was really frustrating because the whole thing was basically just him saying, it's not my scheme that's the problem, it's the players. And he said it a lot more eloquently than that, but the players knew what he meant. And I'm sure the players are really mad at him right now to be saying those things. He's basically saying the execution's not there. Our scheme is perfect, like flawless, but the execution's not there, which is clearly not the truth. Because Danielle Hunter was a really good defensive end before he got hurt. And yes, he might have fallen off a little bit from the injury, but he's not that bad. If he's an afterthought in the game, it's the scheme. It's that problem. And such a limited amount of pass rush last week cost us the game probably because yes, they probably still would have been scoring left and right on us, but even one less touchdown would have kept us in the game at the end. And our secondaries were basically left out to dry because we couldn't get to the quarterback. Anyway, that's my rant on Ed Donatell. I wish we would have fired him before the midpoint, and kind of wish he would never have been our defensive coordinator. But we'll see what happens down the stretch. Maybe Kevin O'Connell can work something out with him, and all we need to do is improve to a point where we can be decent, and it would really help this squad. But yeah, offensive line for the Colts is okay. And then the defense, it's made up of some guys that should be killing it a lot more than they are. Kwity Paye, DeForest Buckner, Yannick Ngakoue, who's kind of fallen off a little bit. And then Stephon Gilmore is on a cornerback spot, as well as Kenny Moore, who is currently out, but kind of based off of the injury report, we'll work on that because some players have played, some players haven't played here in practice. And Kenny Moore right now does have an ankle injury. He didn't practice, so that's going to be a factor. This is a game I really think Justin Jefferson could go crazy in, but we'll kind of go over that matchup. But just kind of going over the defense, it's kind of a defense that could be or should be really good. Like, based on the names you see on paper going into the season, we expected them to be a lot better than they were. They're still playing really good against the pass, but not quite to the caliber that you'd think with this good of a lineup of guys. That being said, let's now go into some of the key injuries. Cornerback Brandy Fancyson for the Colts did not practice again. He is the backup cornerback. He's kind of the third guy that could come in, and that'll be a major factor if Kenny Moore remains out because he didn't practice either. So that's a major factor. Braden Smith has an illness, but he was a full practice, so he should be good to go. That are the only key injuries for the Colts. And now going to the Vikings, a lot more. We have Blake Brandel, who was a limited practice with a knee injury. Cam Dantzler has an illness, which has been kind of going around the team, but it didn't affect a lot of players going into the Lions game. And then Jordan Hicks was limited with an ankle. Harrison Phillips with a back was limited. Bradbury was limited, and he didn't play at all last week, so it's nice to see him practicing again. James Lynch was limited, and then Harrison Smith, a full participant in practice, which is great to see. We sorely missed him last week. Not saying we would have won with him, but still really missed him. Adam Thielen just resting, so he was a limited practice. And then Danielle Hunter with a little bit of a neck thing was limited too. But only one did not practice, or only one did not practice for us. So not a whole lot to be concerned about there. We should have a pretty healthy lineup, assuming a lot of these guys that were limited can play, which I'm assuming now is true. And the biggest one is that Christian Darrisaw will play in this game, which will do wonders for our defensive line because, yes, this Colts lineup hasn't been performing up to expectations, but I'm still concerned about Kwity Paye and DeForest Buckner, especially if we don't have Darrisaw in there. So it'll be O'Neal and Darrisaw kind of trying to hold the fort against those guys. So going into the key matchups here, the main factor for me is that Matt Ryan is going to cause a lot of turnovers, or he has caused turnovers all season long. The Vikings need to jump on that. They need to take advantage of that because if you're not taking advantage of that, the Vikings put up too many points and they allowed too many yards, I should say, to the point where they're going to allow a lot of points if they don't prevent or don't jump on those turnovers. I should rephrase that. If the Vikings can jump on the turnovers, it prevents some of the scoring that could be caused by how many yards they give up, is what I'm trying to say. So that's a main factor. Can we jump on those turnovers that Matt Ryan has been causing all season long? And then on top of that, the Colts have really been sucking, especially passing the ball, but the Vikings have really sucked against the pass. So the question is, who will be the least worst, to put it so eloquently. So right now, going over these stats that I see here on ESPN, points per game, Vikings 24, Colts 16, so offense is definitely not as good. Points allowed per game is 24, Colts 22. So again, Colts defense not playing up to expectations going into the season. Colts also only give up 17 less yards than us per game, and have an average of 244 passing yards per game. Pretty even amount of running yards per game. But here's the main factor: yards allowed. Colts only allowed 204 pass yards per game. So hopefully the Vikings can overcome that a little bit and get a little more than 200, because that would mean that Justin Jefferson was going. I mean, Justin Jefferson got more just receiving than that last week, so we should be able to overcome that. But then the big thing for the Colts, 126 rushing yards allowed per game. So if we can get Delvin Cook going, then hopefully he can salt away the game if we're up, because the Colts have an even worse rushing attack than us. But the Vikings are allowing 301 yards per game, so it'll be a big factor if we can prevent scoring in the red zone here. And then another thing, if the Vikings can get their pass rush back, the Colts, I think, are done for. I mean, the only thing that's going to keep the Colts in this game is if we can't get to Matt Ryan, and he has all the time in the world to eventually find receivers, because Paris Campbell is nothing to sneeze at. And honestly, Michael Pittman Jr. is a rising star in the league. He's not quite to the level where he's top 10 yet, but he can definitely rise through the ranks. If he had a better quarterback, I think that he'd already be close. So these are good guys that can get open if they have enough time to do so. And our cornerbacks just are not good enough where we just allow Matt Ryan to run around and find a guy. It's going to happen. So if we can get the pass rush going, I think that we should be able to smother this Colts offense. Then finally, the Vikings' run defense has to stand strong against Jonathan Taylor because, again, it's still Jonathan Taylor. He's still a threat, even though he hasn't been quite as good. But take care of those things. The Vikings win the North. And I am going to make a prediction. I'm going to make it the full predictions on Friday, but I'm going to make a prediction that this is the first game that the Vikings win since week 1 by more than a touchdown. I'm going to predict this is something around like a 27-14 or 17. I'm going to say 27-17 victory for the Vikings. I think that this might be a feel-good game for our defense after all they've been through the last few weeks, giving up 400 yards per game total. So I believe that this should be a victory and by a pretty wide margin. For the first time, I can say I'm confident in that because the Colts just are not that good of a team. And we should be able to... Some of the mismatches, like the turnover battle, where the Colts are forcing a lot of turnovers, the Colts are causing a lot of turnovers, the Vikings are forcing a lot of them. That's a big mismatch. So we should be able to jump on that. The Colts being so bad of a passing team might be able to get us over the hump finally on defense. I feel pretty confident that this should be a pretty easy win, as easy of a win as the Vikings can have, which we all know is not that much of a big win. But anyway, that's my prediction for the Vikings. Those are my keys to victory. Please let me know what you think in the comments, what you think the keys to victory are, what are some maybe underrated matchups that you've seen that you want to let everyone know about. Please comment that in the comment section. Also, make sure you please like and subscribe if you like what I'm doing. And I'm posting at least 3 or 4 times a week, so make sure you come back, especially tomorrow, where I'm going to be posting my NFL predictions video. So thanks again. Skol Vikings. Vikings play Saturday at noon at US Bank Stadium. I'll see you on the flip side.